Thank you. 감사합니다. And, very happy to be here. I came a few days early and have really been appreciating the mountains in Korea and the hiking, and the food is excellent, and also the conference organizers have been very gracious and very kind and welcoming to the speakers, and I'd like to thank them for that. I also really appreciate being at a university, Dongguk University, that has real strong foundations in Buddhism. So for me to be able to go to a temple at lunchtime and meditate while listening to a rock band playing music is really something unique. And I think the ability for this university to apply Buddhist concepts to emerging priorities in society that are very practical, I think is a great service to the young adults that are going through this program, and I respect that very much. What I'll be talking about today is some of the work that we've been doing to infuse meditation and mindfulness training into an Ivy League university setting at Brown University in the United States, and to share some of the successes and also some of the lessons learned and some of the future that I see that's possible in this arena. For centuries, wisdom traditions have been passed through generations, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or Islam or Hinduism, and these traditions and really the active elements that promote health and well-being in them continue to be passed on generation after generation. And if there weren't those elements in it, they likely would not have been passed on for thousands of years. And then as they enter new eras and new cultures, they're often adapted to meet the population where they're at. So for example, Thich Nhat Hanh, a Zen master from Vietnam, was excommunicated from Vietnam and not able to return. And so he settled in France. And in doing so, it allowed him to really have even greater influence in the West by writing over 100 books just in English, let alone in French and Vietnamese. When we think of and in many ways his teachings came out in part through a lens of psychology, actually, that's really met the West in significant ways. When we think of the Dalai Lama's emergence through the West, a lot of it came through science. And so as different wisdom traditions enter new cultures, how do they need to adapt, and how is it called for them to adapt to be able to meet a population where they're at? And so when we think about it entering to university settings, including in the West, how can wisdom training, such as meditation and mindfulness training, really thrive in university settings now? I'll be talking about some of the work quite a bit grounded in the Mindfulness Center at Brown University that was launched about 8 or 9 years ago now. So quite a bit of what I share will be through that lens. But one of the lenses that I've also found very helpful is the Japanese concept of ikigai. And so when we're thinking about how to serve university students in a university setting, part of it is to allow them to grow and develop and become who they are, and another is for them to get a good job. And so that top green circle here of, can we really help them with self-awareness to really know what they love? And meditation and mindfulness training can help with that self-awareness to really see what is it that lifts us up when our mind just wanders to something that is wonderful. It's good to notice that, because if that is something that we could be paid to do, then we're suddenly working, outside of work and getting a lot done, even when we're just walking through the forest, for example. Can we also see really what the world needs right now, that pink circle on the right, as well as knowing what we're good at, whether it's our natural skills or our learned skills, and then also that bottom piece of what we can be paid for, and so including being paid for at a salary that we're happy with. And so part of what Ikigai is trying to hit the sweet spot where we're doing all four in our life, so that we can be doing what we love, doing really what we're good at, doing work that the world really needs, as well as that can provide us a salary. And so in many ways I see what we can do at a university to be able to support that and nurture that in the young adults. I think all of us here know what mindfulness is. This is a particular working definition that I often work with, where it has sort of three components. One is, the present moment awareness of our thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations. And in many ways, the entirety of the human experience is in those three different domains. And can we be here in the present moment for them? But then there's the quality of that awareness. For example, it may be accepting of just seeing the truth of what is right now and having elements of curiosity and kindness. And then the third part is the element of remembering, where sati is often translated as remembering. And Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, who's a Thai forest monk, once shared how the root, the Pali root for mindfulness is sati, but it shares a common root for the Pali word for arrow, which is sera. And so thousands of years ago, an arrow was the fastest weapon on earth. And so in many ways, mindfulness is like an arrow bringing our wisdom right here, right now. So wherever we get our wisdom from, it doesn't really matter if we have it or not, unless we're applying it right here, right now. And so could mindfulness help us do that? Whether that wisdom is coming from public health recommendations on how to lower your blood pressure, or maybe it's lessons that we've learned from wise people in our lives, or maybe it's wisdom that we've gotten from our own hard-fought experience. Wherever we get that wisdom from, can we apply it right here, right now? And so when I came to Brown about 17 years ago, I was working in the field of social epidemiology, looking at social determinants of health, and particularly the biological mechanisms by which social factors like early life adversity or trauma or abuse or socioeconomic circumstances get embedded in the body, particularly in the cardiovascular system, and influences cardiovascular disease. And I was going for a bike ride once with a friend, and he asked who the main audience was of my work. And I realized it was primarily other academics. And I realized I wanted a bigger impact than that. And so at the time, I was coming to hear about Professor Harold Roth, who's sitting in the front and will be giving a talk tomorrow, and the contemplative studies program that he'd been building that collected faculty from all around the university to be able to teach and do research on contemplative practices, one of which could be mindfulness and meditation. And so I started to connect in with some of these researchers like Willoughby Britton and Kathy Kerr and others, and started to see how mindfulness had the potential to really help ameliorate some of the social determinants of health, like exposure to trauma or neglect. At that time, I had a strong personal mindfulness practice. I was trained in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh and became ordained in that tradition eventually, and I wasn't bringing that into my day-to-day work. But the contemplative studies program and the faculty around there allowed me to start to embark on that journey. And so at the time, I had a very large study in the New England Family Study that is a study of 17,000 people that have been followed since they're in their mother's wombs. So in the first trimester, second trimester of pregnancy, all these women were enrolled to see the impacts of factors during pregnancy on the health outcomes of their children. But researchers have been following them now for 6 decades, so they're now in their 60s. And I brought them in their late 40s. And did a very extensive cardiovascular health assessment on them to look at the effects of early life factors on later life, epigenetic modulations and thickening of the carotid arteries and, blood glucose regulation and physical activity. And so I was able to put in a mindfulness questionnaire, the Mindful Attention Awareness Scale. It's a validated measure just because I was leading the study and I could, and it didn't take up too much time. And so we started to look at it in relationship to a lot of the cardiovascular health outcomes. And so one of the things that we found around overall cardiovascular health, so this is like a combination of smoking rates and diabetes and obesity and physical activity and diet, we found that people who had high levels of mindfulness had an 86% higher likelihood of having good quality cardiovascular health compared to those with low levels of mindfulness. We also did DEXA scans in participants that directly measures fat distribution in the body, as well as bone density. And so we found that those that had the low levels of mindfulness had a 0.5 kilogram extra fat mass just in the midsection. This actually got into Time magazine. We also found, when you think of like waist to hip ratio, that the distribution of fat mass in the body was also significantly higher in the waist area compared to the hip. We looked at obesity rates using body mass index, finding that those with low levels of mindfulness had about a 34% higher likelihood of being obese. And we also looked at type 2 diabetes risk, where those with high levels of mindfulness had a 60% higher likelihood of having normal fasting glucose, and the rates of diabetes were about half that in those with high levels of mindfulness compared to low levels. So this suggested there was really something going on. Like, I had no idea the effects would be this strong. And so at the time, I was going through training in mindfulness-based stress reduction as an evidence-based mindfulness program that was developed by John Kabat-Zinn almost 50 years ago, and decided that I would start to adapt it to particularly foster cardiovascular health, in particular reduce blood pressure. At that time, there was a bunch of primarily like junior faculty members, pretty young scientists that were really, many of them rising stars, including David Vago, who is giving a talk tomorrow. But we started to gather, we called ourselves the Mindfulness Research Collaborative, and we started to gather about every 4 to 6 months or so, and we would go to one of our institutions, and we would usually workshop 2 people's ideas. And so one person would get a chance to just present their thinking, early stage thinking, and maybe some pilot findings, and then a gathering of really smart, skilled people would just give feedback. And for me, as a young investigator, just getting into the science of mindfulness, it was invaluable to be able to get that kind of work. We built such close relationships that we decided to write a grant, a big grant together to the National Institutes of Health. So we included the entire Mindfulness Research Collaborative in the application, and we ended up getting the grant. It was, at the time, we understand the largest grant from the National Institutes of Health given to the mindfulness research domain. It was almost $5 million. And so we suddenly had our work set out for us. And so one of the things that we did is that we did a series of systematic reviews where we looked at every single study published on the impacts of mindfulness or meditation on different mechanisms that actually the prior speaker was talking about. So one was around self-awareness, or what we could call self-related processes. And so we looked at, the other one was on cognitive function, or like attention control, for example, and another one was around emotional regulation. And the idea was to look at mechanisms that were to find the ones that were responsive to mindfulness and meditation interventions, because not everyone is responsive. And so if we could see which ones actually responded to interventions, we could then start to include those in more and more clinical trials, and to see if the changes in those potential mechanisms translated into health behaviors like diet or physical activity, or even more distal health outcomes. So we published a number of systematic reviews really identifying what kind of mechanisms are responsive to mindfulness interventions. And then we took those responsive mindfulness mechanisms and embedded them in 2 parallel clinical trials. One done at Harvard, led by Zev Schumann-Olivier, and then the other one done at Brown University, led by myself. And so with Zev, his clinical trial was primarily in primary care patients, many that were working with addictions. And then for mine, it was primarily focused in people that had elevated blood pressure. And so we had different health outcomes, but we were looking at similar mechanisms and matched our measures to each other to be able to see if we had common shifts in the mechanisms by which mindfulness and meditation training could influence health outcomes. And these are some of the studies that came from that. For example, that top right one was looking at self-awareness or interoceptive awareness and its impacts on dietary change, and found that about 1/3 of the effect on diet was operating through that self-awareness or through interoceptive awareness. And so just to give you an example of some of the work that we did, this was the mindfulness-based blood pressure reduction program. So this was the clinical trial that was operating out of Brown. And so we first started to develop like a theoretical framework of, if meditation and mindfulness is going to influence blood pressure, this bottom box here, it's probably going to happen through the major determinants of blood pressure that we know a lot about. Things like physical activity or weight loss or diet, alcohol use, stress reactivity. There's a lot of really good medications out there for hypertension. It's just that a lot of people don't take the medications. And so if mindfulness training is going to influence blood pressure, it's probably going to operate through those pathways. And so then how could mindfulness and meditation actually influence these pathways? And so this is where we turn to a framework that also the prior speaker was talking about. It was developed by Yi-Ying Tang and Britta Holtzell and colleagues, where it seems like mindfulness meditation can help us just self-regulate better. That it may help us with the self-awareness, knowing what's happening, say in our thoughts, emotions, physical sensations. So say, for example, if we get physical activity, how do we feel after the physical activity? And often just about everybody feels better, even for hours after physical activity. So that self-awareness can start to notice how we feel with physical activity and often the positive effects that come from that. We can notice how we feel when we eat, say, ultra-processed foods or something maybe really sweet, where we maybe get a sugar rush and then a sugar crash, and then the craving for the next treat, for example. And so we're just observing with non-judgmental self-awareness our experience, but always applied to the factors that influence blood pressure. Meditation training can also help with attention control. So we might get some insight about, say, how we feel, before, during, and after drinking alcohol, for example. It might be fun during it. We might have a hangover the next day, but we're not judgmental about it. We're just noticing the path and whatever it is. And we might get some insight around, maybe, I should cut down on that. And it's one thing to have that insight, it's another to act on it. And the attention control can actually help us act on it. So that if we have, with meditation training, more training to be able to place our mind where we choose to place it, then if we choose to act in a particular way, maybe when we're at the grocery store selecting certain kinds of foods, if we decide we want to eat more fruits and vegetables, can we use the attention control to actually select those foods? And when we're cooking, to actually prepare them. And so it might be that combination can be powerful, along with the emotion regulation strategies that come with mindfulness and meditation, such as becoming more aware of the stressors in our lives and the skills to address those stressors. Sometimes we might want to use attentional redeployment, for example, to direct our attention somewhere else that's maybe more healthy. Other times we might want to move closer to the stressor and deeply understand it. But the emotion regulation strategies can come in place so that instead of maybe turning to, say, alcohol to regulate our emotions, or to turn to a tub of ice cream in the freezer to regulate our emotions, or maybe just to turn to our phone and to scroll, or to watch some kind of film instead of maybe going for a walk with a friend, then we might start to get more skillful emotion regulation strategies that also bring our blood pressure down. And so the mindfulness-based blood pressure reduction program was grounded in mindfulness-based stress reduction that had already been shown a number of different health effects. We trained people up in these 3 skills of emotion regulation, attention control, and self-awareness, but consistently applied it to their relationships with food, the relationship with physical activity, with weight loss, alcohol use, stress reactivity, and even antihypertensive medication use. And so in doing so, this was like an 8-week program where people met once a week for 2.5 hours in group. We also had an all-day retreat partway through the program. And so when we think about the mechanisms, say, around self-awareness here, we measured self-awareness using the multidimensional assessment of interoceptive awareness that our systematic reviews were showing was pretty responsive, actually, to mindfulness interventions, and found nice improvements in self-awareness in the intervention group compared to the control. And this was a sample size of 201 participants, so pretty big clinical trial. We looked at also emotion regulation. Depression symptoms have also been shown to be responsive to mindfulness interventions. And so while this population didn't have particularly high depression levels, everyone's kind of somewhere on the continuum of depression scales, and found significant reductions in depression symptoms compared to control. When we looked at one of our primary outcomes that we pre-registered on clinicaltrials.gov, It's the DASH diet, stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. It's the most evidence-based diet to bring blood pressure down. And so we found, particularly in those that had poor quality DASH diet at baseline, significant improvements in those going through the mindfulness intervention compared to control. And then we looked at sedentary behavior and basically the number of minutes that people were sitting, and found pretty nice reductions in how much sedentary time people were engaging in. So we were starting to see health behavior change as well that influences blood pressure. And then when we looked at blood pressure itself, the blood pressure came down about 6 millimeters of mercury, systolic blood pressure, and was significantly lower than the control group. About a 5 millimeter drop in systolic blood pressure translates into about a 10% drop in cardiovascular events like heart attacks and strokes. So it was a clinically meaningful reduction in systolic blood pressure. So that's an example of some of the research that we've been doing at Brown, including this work showing improvements in overall cardiovascular health too. So at Brown, at the Mindfulness Center, we've formed basically two different units. One is called a research unit, and then the other is the education unit. And so if we look at the research unit, we have many faculty members in it, and particular areas of expertise that we have like hubs of excellence around. So for example, we have mental health excellence, we have cardiometabolic health. We also look at adverse events and trauma sensitivity, so that not all the effects of meditation and mindfulness are positive, and some people can have difficult experiences with meditation too. And so how can we understand what those difficult experiences are, and ways that we can adapt the delivery of mindfulness and meditation to minimize the difficult experiences while maximizing the benefits. We do a reasonable amount of work in health equity, as well as digital technology or mobile health, and implementation science. And implementation science has a lot to do with, say, health insurance coverage of mindfulness interventions or increasing accessibility to them. So we have some really great people working in that area too. And so one of the ways that we've worked with the research unit is to just foster opportunities for collaboration, so that we have like pilot research grants, for example, where people can start to do this pilot work that has led to initial studies that can then be funded by, say, the National Institutes of Health. We've had about 4 National Institutes of Health grants come from those pilot studies. And so we bring in people with a lot of different backgrounds, like Judson Brewer, for example, is an addiction psychiatrist and does a lot of work in neuroscience and digital delivery of mindfulness interventions. Willoughby Britton, who does a lot of work around adverse events of meditation training and how to skillfully respond when those occur. Maggie Bublitz does work in pregnancy, for example, and particularly hypertensive disorders during pregnancy, and how mindfulness training can influence not only the pregnant women, but also their offspring. Ronnie Elwey is an implementation scientist and does a lot of work around health insurance coverage of mindfulness interventions. Brandon Gaudiano is an expert in psychosis or schizophrenia and acceptance and commitment therapy, and has found with people who are admitted to hospital with psychosis that if they receive acceptance and commitment therapy while they're in hospital, once they're released, it really dramatically reduces their likelihood of being re-hospitalized, so that they're able to have greater acceptance and understanding of, say, the psychosis that's happening there, and to be more comfortable with it occurring, such that they're less likely to need to return to hospital. So we have a lot of different faculty members. For example, Jeffrey Prue is Native American and does a lot of work with indigenous groups to bring mindfulness training that's already existing in many of the cultures and to express it out in authentic ways. And so we also have a number of faculty affiliates that these are folks that are maybe not leading mindfulness interventions themselves, but are interested in it and really have complementary skills that add on, like Paja Fadre, for example, who's in anthropology and looks at psychedelics, for example, and their interface with meditation and mindfulness. Roy Gutman does advanced biostatistics and is really interested in mindfulness interventions and provides biostatistical advice. we have faculty like Patty Hall and Lynn Corbel that are leading instructors in mindfulness-based stress reduction and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And the list goes on. We have neuroscience, theater and the arts, behavior change. Professor Roth, of course, who does a lot of work in Buddhism and Taoism and religious studies. And so what we've tried to do here is to create a rich environment of interdisciplinary experts, all skilled in mindfulness and meditation training from various different domains, so that we can intersect and collaborate and do really high quality research, and have been quite successful in doing so. We also have an education unit, and so here we have programs that are outward facing to the general public all around the world. People take these programs, and so we teach like evidence-based interventions like mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, but also have certification programs for teachers to be able to get trained up on how to teach them in skilled ways. We offer general programs for the public that are evidence-based, like mindfulness-based stress reduction or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, finding peace in a frantic world. We also offer mindfulness-based blood pressure reduction now. And we had over 1,000 people go through our programs just last year. And then we also do work within the university itself. So for example, for staff and faculty, if they take good care of their health, like they go and see their family doctor and they go to the dentist appointment, these things, they start to accumulate points, and then they can use those points to get a free gym membership at the Brown, or they can use the points to get a free course in, say, mindfulness-based stress reduction or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So we've had a lot of staff and faculty go through our programs for free at the university, and that's actually helped in a lot of ways the culture in the university too, where I might be in meetings at times and someone will just kind of quietly tell me that they've gone through our programs and are really grateful for that. I think it's created a lot of goodwill actually amongst the university. We also offer programs for students as well, including lunchtime sessions and ways that are just kind of integrated into the well-being structure at the university. And then we also offer courses. These are 4-credit courses. So this is one example called Meditation, Mindfulness, and Health, where students learn the science of meditation and mindfulness, so the various different kinds of mindfulness interventions, like mindfulness-based stress reduction or acceptance and commitment therapy or mindfulness-oriented recovery enhancement, and their impacts on various different health conditions, whether it's pain management or anxiety or depression or weight loss or diet or sleep. But then they also get first-person experience. So they actually go through a program that's very similar to mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's just a little briefer without the retreat, so that they actually get to see for themselves what an evidence-based mindfulness program is like, as well as taking a step back and really rigorously looking at the science. And so by the time that they're done the course, they have both the first-person experience of having going through a mindfulness program themselves, as well as the third-person experience of just being able to take a step back and see what the science shows. And so this is a course that I actually teach, and I had a master's student asked to measure the health effects actually of students going through this course, and that was her master's project, and she found significant improvements, for example, in stress levels of the students going through it, but also they did better on standardized test scores, including the GRE, which is a standardized test to get into graduate school. And so that inspired me to develop the mindfulness-based college program so that it could be scaled and offered to people around the world. So we used a similar theoretical framework, but instead of it being blood pressure, we looked at common determinants of young adult health, like, say, digital media addiction or loneliness, stress, alcohol, substance use, physical activity, diet, obesity, sleep. And we created a compilation measure of all of those factors together and pre-registered that on clinicaltrials.gov to see if we train them in these skills of self-awareness and attention control and emotion regulation, but then applied it to those common determinants of young adult health, if that would actually boost their well-being. We did a systematic review on all randomized controlled trials in college students and found where each one of these circles represents a different clinical trial. You can see in the mental health domain that there's a lot of studies in mental health in college students for mindfulness training, and very few in physical health, only like 3, and also very few in health behaviors, only 4. So we felt that by looking at sort of whole person health, both the mental and the physical, that it might create like a unique opportunity to support young adult well-being, not only in the mental domain, but also in the physical domain. And so we created this randomized controlled trial to look at the effects on young adult health, and randomized students to either take the mindfulness-based college program or else an enhanced usual care control that involves some health education and access to a physician if they needed it. And we measured them starting at the beginning of the school term when they're a little more relaxed, and then the follow-up assessments were right at the end of the term when they're in the middle of preparing for exams and their term papers are due. And so here are the results where you can see in the control group that their health actually got worse as the term went on, which is common for students going through the college term, where by the time the exams are coming up and the term papers are due, their well-being has declined. While those going through the mindfulness-based college program, their health actually improved over the term rather than going down, and significant between group differences. When we looked at some of the drivers of that, one was that the students were moving more as the term went down, so they were spending less time sitting. Their sleep quality was also improving over the term, while in the control group, the sleep quality was actually getting worse. We found that depression symptoms were getting worse in the control group, but for the folks going through the mindfulness intervention, they stayed steady. And so the stressors tend to mount as the term goes on, as all the exams are coming up and term papers are due. So even in the presence of that increasing amount of stressors, their depression stayed steady. They didn't go down, but also didn't go up compared to the control group. And also their loneliness levels came down. And loneliness is a bit of an epidemic right now, certainly in North America, but also I understand worldwide. And so these courses were in person, and these students were having really important conversations with each other and forming social bonds with each other that lasted long after the course was done. And so could these kinds of programs also be a way to impact loneliness in young adults as well, by creating some kind of meaning and opportunities for them to connect with each other? And so one of the next pieces that I did in order to scale up that program was to write a book, like a self-help book in many ways for young adults. And so Paul, who's featured in the book, is a friend, and he spent his 19th birthday in jail, and including in times of like full isolation in jail. And he'd had a lot of challenges in his youth. He was admitted many times to psychiatric wards, for example, and while he was in jail, a Buddhist nun would visit him and taught him how to meditate and gave him readings that he found very useful. And so when he came out of jail, he did two things. One is he started to get into boxing that really helped him self-regulate his physical activity better, and the other thing that he got really into was meditation and mindfulness. And so he lives in Providence. He's been trained now to be a mindfulness-based college instructor, and has left behind a history of addiction to substance use and alcohol. And so one of the things that he shared here is, when I put a substance of any kind in my body that feels good, it tends to set a chain of events into action that doesn't make me feel good. Even the first one turns me into someone I don't want to be. There's this saying, there's certain things that control is impossible the moment it's suggested. That's alcohol and drugs for me. When addiction was manifesting itself in heavy ways for me, I think I was looking for something. I was looking for something the world isn't offering, something that made me feel whole and connected. The practice of mindfulness is the most direct route to that feeling. It takes some hard work, courage, and commitment, but there's no moment at which it's not possible. And so it's an example of how a young adult found mindfulness and meditation at just the right time, and it truly changed his life. He's now married and father of 2 kids, and a successful artist and a mindfulness teacher in the city. Venerable Misan in Korea translated that book into Korean, so it's now available in Korean as well. One of the other pieces that we've done is to create a graduate level program where we have a Master's of Public Health that's quite high quality at Brown University, where students learn, study design and data analysis and health services, health promotion strategies. It's quite a effective degree program. But we now have the first mindfulness track in the world where students can learn all those things, but then they do a deep dive into the science and practice of mindfulness so that they learn, say, mindfulness epidemiology that's all around study design and measurement and what we call causal inference and mindfulness training, so that we're really training outstanding scientists in the area. And so we've had graduates from there go on to teach meditation at Harvard University, to go into PhD programs, into medicine. We have one medical doctor from Indonesia who just graduated and is now building a mindfulness training program in the medical school that he's affiliated with in Indonesia. So it's created a whole type of graduate that is very skilled in public health science, but also in the science and practice of mindfulness too. And so when I take a step back, from my university administrators, they often want to know what are our key performance indicators, like from their perspective, like really how are we doing in this? So when we look at our research unit, just last year we had 25 peer-reviewed publications on mindfulness, for example. Just last year we spent $7.5 million in grants from the NIH. We've had over $30 million of grants now. Just last year, we had over 1,000 people take our programs from the public. And so these are people taking general programs, but then also we're doing the teacher trainings where people come to become teachers and then they influence hundreds of people themselves. And we have, 11 primary faculty members and 17 faculty affiliates. So it is the largest mindfulness center in the world as far as I'm aware of. In terms of some of the guiding principles and lessons that I've learned in going through the process of helping build out that center is to really understand and catalyze the strengths and the priorities of the organization in which we're operating in, so that Brown University is quite strong in public health. They're also quite strong in medicine, for example, and in neuroscience, and also in contemplative studies, for example. And so how could we recognize what Brown's already doing well at, so that can spiral us up into excellence, because we're working within the environment that we have. Mindfulness can be applied to anything, really, whether it's economics or law or business or music. But at Brown, some of the pieces that we could see we were really good at, we catalyze with those, and that's where we're going. Another piece is just to understand and respect and work strategically with the organization's governance and approval process. So, for example, both Professor Roth and I have gone through review processes through what's called the Academic Priorities Committee. That's the collection of the provost and all the deans in the school and other leaders, and they grill us on really how our programs are working and give us feedback on how we could do better. And I really try to respect that process and integrate in the feedback and then act on that feedback. And that helps me be more accepted, I think, at the university. This idea of building and nurturing relationships within the organization, so that it's almost like the friendships are there. And when we enjoy each other and care about each other, we often want to just help each other. We're just all doing the best we can, and how can we bring that up into the university? And if we're doing good for society and we're not losing money, the university tends to generally be okay with it, as well as nurturing relationships nationally and internationally too, so that we can really support the field as a whole. I think another piece that I've learned is to acknowledge and lower the risk for potential adverse events in mindfulness and meditation training. So that if a student's coming into one of our programs and maybe they have a history of trauma or challenging experiences. I have one in my class right now, actually, that I'm working with around that, to just acknowledge it, even to name it, that these things can happen, and then to become trauma sensitive and skillful in supporting the students, knowing that mindfulness and meditation might not be for everyone, and to offer lots of off-ramps, knowing that there's many paths to health and happiness, and mindfulness and meditation might be one, maybe not for everyone, and then there can be other paths as well. So to acknowledge that, I've found has created a container so that if some difficult experience does come up, the students, know that can happen, and that they feel like they can come to us or to others to get that support. It's fairly rare when it happens, but it can. Another piece that we've been working with is to just avoid cultural appropriation, where we actually share, say the Buddhist roots of our programs or the Taoist roots, while also being welcoming to people of all backgrounds without raising concern about us converting them to some particular religion. And it's a balance, so that if we don't mention Buddhism at all, we're not acknowledging, say, some of the contemplative roots that some of these programs came from, while at the same time sharing that we're not trying to convert them to Buddhism or anything. It's just these skills that can be of support. And then I do try to align the programs with these Ikigai principles, because the parents are paying a lot of tuition for their students to come to Brown, and they would like them to get a good quality job at the end. And so how can we be very practical with this training, where we're helping them to really see what is important for the world, what do they really enjoy learning about, what will create well-paying jobs for themselves, and what both the students and the organization excel at, and to hit the sweet spot of all four of those, so that students graduating from our programs have really valuable skills that are going to be contributing to society, that will help them have a job to support themselves and their family. I think another piece that we really try to do is just to do really high-quality, methodologically strong research on innovative topics, and then just report our findings, whatever they are. So if they're null findings that showed no effect, to be clear about that, or even if they went in an opposite direction, so that just helps. In Buddhism, we're often just trying to see the truth, and science is a tool to see the truth. And so whatever the truth comes out with the scientific findings, can we just report that? And then that allows us to evolve as a society to do what works and to let go of what doesn't. And we've also found offering evidence-based mindfulness practices at all levels of the university, whether it's to faculty, staff, or trainees, can be really supportive and has helped us. We've at times had to work with the Office of General Counsel at Brown, like as the top lawyers in the university, when different challenges come up. And it's in groups like that where someone will quietly tell me on that team that they've taken our mindfulness programs and are really grateful for that suddenly we have people in places of consequence that have taken our programs. We've had one of the provosts go through mindfulness training with our group, and then I helped train his partner in that. So by just offering these services throughout the university, we've found that it builds a lot of goodwill, but also a lot of understanding about what we do, and appreciation for that, so that it can just smooth paths for us to skillfully move forward. When I think about future directions for the field, one is to just continue to apply mindfulness and meditation training to contemporary high-interest topics. Say artificial intelligence. I think there's great opportunities for mindfulness and meditation in AI, to apply it to climate change or to leadership, loneliness, mental and physical health, for example. Other opportunities, I think, are really to integrate mindfulness and meditation into practical fields that support career development, whether it's medicine or public health or economics, law, education, engineering, technology, political science, military and defense, first responders, athletic performance, music, the arts, humanities. It can apply to any discipline in any university, and I think there's great opportunities to further apply it where it isn't hitting a lot yet. So for example, at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, they invite me up every year to give a talk to the students in the business school, for example, the School of Management. And so there's a great interest there in how mindfulness training can not only improve happiness, but also performance in leadership. I think there's real opportunities to research and identify and optimize the active elements within wisdom traditions that foster health and happiness. I think our prior speaker gave an example of that with the Temple Stay program, for example, and to really look at methodologically rigorous studies to just clarify the impacts of different wisdom traditions and their practices on health and happiness, so that these wisdom traditions, whether it's the particular forms of Zen practice in Korea, for example, or whether it's in Christianity or Hinduism or Islam, I think they're entire packages that when we just extract out one element, it's missing a lot of the wisdom that's associated with that particular tradition. And so can we also be looking at the traditions as a whole to see what impacts on health they have, and to allow them to continue to serve society and for us to know how they operate, so that when we think about future generations considering these traditions, they will see some of the evidence on how it operates and what kind of benefits it has, and also maybe where it could use some improvements potentially too. So that concludes the talk around some of the experiences that we've had around bringing mindfulness and meditation into university in the West. So thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 라옥스 박사님의 마음챙김과 심혈관계 건강, 체지방, 혈압, 당뇨병 간의 관계에 대한 연구들을 말씀을 해주셨고요. 이를 엄격한 과학적 검증으로 그 효과에 대해서도 친절히 말씀을 해주셨습니다. 또한 브라운대학의 마음챙김센터의 출범과 지금까지의 성과 속에서의 핵심 원칙, 그리고 우리가 주의해야 할 점, 성찰점, 그리고 미래 방향까지 말씀을 해주신 것 같습니다. 어쩌면 저희가 준비하고 있는 명상의 생활화, 대중화, 세계화라고 하는 이 논의와 관련해서 중요한 저희에게도 메시지가 되지 않을까 하는 생각입니다. 그럼 저희가 준비한 사전에 받은 질문을 드려보도록 하겠습니다. 첫 번째 질문입니다. 현대 마음챙김 명상은 산란함을 가라앉히고 내면 성찰의 기회를 주는데요. 이 과정의 체험이 지혜의 발견인지 현상의 알아차림인지 에 대한 의문이 있습니다. 그리고 알아차림이 깊어져서 지혜로 나아가도록 돕는 방법이 또 있을지 개인적인 경험을 더해서 알려주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so with that first question, I'm just going to put my glasses on. So in terms of how the program's different compared to programs designed for other age groups, I think compared to like older adults, like middle-aged and older adults, our programs they're just much more up and centered on naming the challenges that young adults are facing right now, say around digital media addiction, or working with alcohol and substance use, or loneliness, for example, or diet, physical activity. And then everyone in the classroom is a young adult, so they have the peer effects of just being there with each other, to be able to share what's going on in their lives with peers that are at their same age. I also find that young adults are a little less likely to share how they feel in a large group compared to older adults, like at my age and beyond, where we don't necessarily care as much about what other people think. We'll just like say it. And young adults, they're pretty attuned to what each other think about them, and maybe it's developmentally appropriate because they're still looking for like a spouse and a job, and they really need to tend to what other people think about them. But so we still do the full group discussions, but I do much more small group stuff of just partners or threes or fours. And when it's just a small group like that, they really just talk and talk and talk. And I find when it's a very large group, it depends a bit on the group. Sometimes it can be a bit quiet. Sometimes my group right now, I have 84 students right now, and they're actually really engaged this year. But I find we do a little bit more on the small side. I think compared to adolescence, I'm not as much an expert on interventions in adolescence. I think one of the things that we're seeing coming out of, say, the Myriad trial in the United Kingdom that was on several thousand adolescents, as well as a similar trial in Denmark, is the health effects when kids receive it in school and it's mandatory aren't always so great. it seems that if the kids don't want to be there, that it might not be all that great for their well-being. For the kids that do want to be there and they find it useful, then their well-being can improve. And so I think we're still having quite a bit to learn around mindfulness training in adolescence. For me, I have done some training myself just in my community where we created a sangha that was for families, so that the parents and the children would come, as well as the grandparents sometimes, and then we would have programs for the kids, as well as for the adults, and then programs all together. And I found that operating at the family level was quite effective. And the main things that I prioritized with adolescents when I was leading the programs for them was fun and modeling it myself. And I think young children, their brains aren't as fully developed, and the prefrontal cortex, for example, the area of logic and reason, just isn't there yet until the mid-20s. And so I'm not always so sure how much we can train them in self-regulation strategies with meditation. I think it is possible. I'm just not an expert in it. But what I can do is model it myself. And so they're just watching the adults in their lives. And if they see some kind of stressor arise and they see us navigate it skillfully, I think that modeling can kind of sink in, along with it just making sure that it's fun. And so if there's the playfulness there and the modeling the adults, that's some of the approach that I do. But then by the time they're in young adulthood, where their brains are just about fully developed from a developmental phase, where the prefrontal cortex is fully engaged, we can get into more higher level discussions and more kind of like training around decentering or being able to take a step back from our thoughts and emotions because they have the brain structure to be able to engage in those kinds of processes. So that's been some of the ways that I've personally learned from it, but I think having an expert really in adolescence, I'm sure would teach us even more. So thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 잠시 말씀 덧붙여 드리면 저희가 질문을 2개를 준비를 했었는데요. 그 2개 중에 두 번째 질문에 대한 답변을 먼저 해주신 것 같습니다. 그래서 두 번째 질문 화면 한번 띄워봐 주시면 저희가 준비한 두 번째 질문이 뭐였냐면 대학생이라고 하는 특정 연령층의 특성을 고려한 그 마음챙김 프로그램에 대한 부분, 그리고 연령층에 따라서 좀 차별성에 대한 고려점, 이런 부분들을 이렇게 질문을 준비했었는데요. 이 부분에 대한 답변을 먼저 해주신 상황이라는 점 말씀을 드리고, 다시 이어서 처음 제가 질문을 드렸던 그 내용과 관련해서 말씀 여쭙도록 하겠습니다. 제가 처음 드렸던 질문이 저희가 이제 마음챙김 이 명상으로 할 때 지혜의 발견인지 아니면 그냥 현상적인 그 알아차림에 대한 부분인지 이제 그것에 대한 약간의 의문점에 대해서 여쭙는 부분이었고, 이 현상적인 알아차림이라는 부분을 지혜로 좀 더 나아가도록 하는 그 방법에 대한 개인적인 경험에 대해서 부탁 말씀을 드렸었거든요. 그래서 약간의 순서가 바뀌긴 했지만 충분히 또 저희 청중분들께서 잘 숙지하시리라고 생각이 듭니다. 답변 다시 한번 부탁드리도록 하겠습니다. 네.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so in terms of is modern mindfulness meditation more about discovering wisdom or recognizing phenomena? I think of phenomena like, say, the second factor of awakening, like in the 7 factors of awakening, where we're investigating phenomena itself, so we're trying to find the truth. And once we see the truth, wisdom arises. So if we're investigating phenomena around, say, cause and effect, when I do this thing happens. Once we start to see that, then wisdom arises. So for me, I think of it not so much one or the other, but maybe an ordering where the recognizing or the investigation of phenomena, the curiosity into the causes of suffering maybe comes first. And then once we see what those causes are, then the wisdom comes next. So that's some of my experience with it. In terms of based on your personal experience, is there a way to deepen awareness so that it leads to wisdom? I think it's a wonderful, wonderful question. I think the Dharma talk at the beginning of the day today had many, many answers in there. I think the next book that I'm writing now is grounded in the Buddhist concepts of the 7 factors of awakening and the 4 Brahma-viharas. And I think if we're trying to find a way to deepen our awareness so that it leads to wisdom, I think there's a lot there. So for example, mindfulness is the first factor of awakening. So that can we be aware of like our thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations, but then once we're aware, can we explore in with curiosity, maybe, which is the second factor of awakening, that if we have some suffering there, can we explore into the roots of that suffering? And which is, and then once we understand those roots, often energy can arise because we've realized the source of our suffering. And so then that creates energy, which is the third factor of awakening. And that can be the energy to change. And another way to translate that is actually courage, because sometimes it takes quite a bit of courage to change. And so then if we can act on that courage, it can start to lead to, say, joy. If we start to align our lives with the truth of, say, in our case, if we start to align our lives with the foods that start to create well-being, then we might find ourselves less agitated. And if we start to become more physically active, for example, the body's designed for that, we might have less pain. And so then joy can come, which is actually the 7th factor of awakening, which can then lead to ease. So as our body starts to become in better homeostasis and is operating better, both mentally and physically, ease can arise, which is the 5th factor of awakening, which can then set the stage for concentration, for us to be truly right here, right now, and to be able to enhance, say, our career or our lives or our well-being or our friendships. And that's the 6th factor of awakening, is concentration, which can then lead to equanimity or equipoise, so that we're able to have a balanced mind despite whatever winds are blowing of praise or blame or gain or loss or whatever it is. And so that's the 7 factors of awakening that I think can really deepen awareness, that can lead to wisdom. But there's also some suggestion that that is not enough. Those 7 factors of awakening don't include too much around social relationships and community, for example. And so that's where the 4 Brahma-viharas come in. So that if we're also offering loving kindness to ourselves and others, offering well wishes to the others in our community as well as to ourselves, that can lift us up and to be able to support others while pairing it with compassion, which is the second of the 4 Brahma-viharas, so that we're offering compassion not only for others and ourselves, and knowing that compassion involves both empathy and action. So it's not just, say, feeling sorry for someone, but it's understanding someone in a way that actually activates us to act to, say, support them or to do better for the world. And then that third piece around sympathetic joy, the 3rd Brahma-vihara, so that we can have not only joy. I think sometimes the world lacks some joy these days because we're always looking at the news or whatever, but actually there's many opportunities for joy, including all of us gathering here today for the next 2 days, and what a wonderful moment this is. And so can we have joy not only for ourselves, but really for others, and the goodwill and the good things that happen for them, and finally still having equanimity there as an anchor, because sometimes if we have so much compassion for someone, it might throw us off balance. Or if we have so much love for someone, it might also throw us off balance. So can we have that equanimity like a rudder to just keep us steady? And so that's just one example of a Buddhist framework that can lead to deepening our awareness, that can then lead to wisdom. There's other frameworks too, and many were talked about in the Dharma talk earlier today, as well as some of the other presentations too. But that's one particular one that I happen to be writing a book on right now, applied to lowering blood pressure, but have found it personally very valuable as well. So thank you.